I saw you toss the kites on high above the birds about the sky, and all around I heard you pass like lady skirts across the grass. Oh, wind a-blowing all day long, oh, wind that sings so loud a song. I saw the different things you did, but always you yourself you hid. I felt you push, I heard you call, I could not see yourself at all. Oh, wind a-blowing all day long, oh, wind that sings so loud a song. Oh, you that are so strong and cold to blow, where are you young or old? Are you a beast, a field and tree, or just a stronger child than me? Oh, wind a-blowing all day long, oh, wind that sings so loud a song.
I don't know about the meaning crisis, left, right, black, white, or other vices, which Jesus Christ is right, or if we're all saved. From my perspective, our propositions participate procedurally, running in circles. Remember in body, we're in the age of decay. Symbolically speaking, the reapers are reaping, them damn egregores are whispering sweetly. We're all NPCs in the belly of the beast. Red pill, blue pill, bread pill, Mars Hill, or DMT, or whatever you feel. Got one and number two, it's all the same damn thing. So clean your room, repent on Zoom, ontology for dummies, a bird's eye view. 'Cause if you really knew, could you really even say? Totally depraved, all totally saved, a total disposition from the bed we all made. Or is it the elect, or are we just insane? From John Vervaeke to Jonathan Pajot and Jordan Peterson to the Chris Pacou Show, Paul Vanderklays and Griswold Grimm and all the dice he shakes. This estuary ditty is a little bit cringy, ain't quite the U-shaped or the hero's journey. All the NPCs in the flood treading water to watch you save the day with a bunch of chitter-chatter. From the ortho bros to the Catholic Joes, or atheistic Jobs, to Protestant folks, the Joe Schmoes and Jewish Jacobs, and everything in between. So love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, with all your mind and your fingers and toes, all your neighbors too, as if they were your own. So love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul, and with all your mind and your fingers and toes, all your neighbors too, as if they were your own.
Good morning. A little bit of special Virtual Not Alone branding this morning to welcome you all in. Yeah, the Gavin Chad Productions did a little reaping from Chad's channel this morning, so I could have a little bit of VNA branding, because really that's what this stream is about. I should make good on the title. I should look up the title. I'm streaming from down below here instead of up above, because I'm continuing to play with my office. And I've got a fan back there instead of the theology books, and the chair I usually sit in when I stream up there, and this movable desk. I'm looking to be able to stream sitting back and sitting up and standing up. And so I continue to work on this. I listened to the Jordan Peterson, Brett Weinstein, Heather Hying conversation, and one of the things that really caught my attention, actually, Chad played the exact same clip this morning in the Friday Morning Nameless. And let's jump in. I usually don't use StreamYard for this stuff, so I'm learning as we go.
Things we're wrestling with at Peterson Academy, obviously, is like, I see no reason. I don't see much distinction, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't see much distinction between lecturing to 1,000 people and lecturing to, say, 100,000 people. Like,
this is part of how YouTube is. I got to get my little stage presence here correct. This is sort of how YouTube is disrupting education, and it's not only disrupting education; it's disrupting church. Can't hear your air conditioner. Church has been playing around. One of the things that I notice in a lot of these corner conversations and in a lot of the video conversations is that many of these things that we're dealing with in the corner now have been dealt with over the last number of decades in church and theology. For example, a lot of the work against substance ontology bears a fair amount of resemblance to process theology. And of course, most of you don't know any of that right now, but it's all out there. And churches, well, let's go back in time. And I've made this speech a number of times. This is one of these speeches you probably hear me say a lot. The Orthodox Church, part of what they like to, how they like to promote is that they preserve in some ways very early liturgy and remnants of the church to the best that we can know. It's super hard to know what church was in the first century. It's very clear that the Apostle Paul is going around Asia Minor, Greece, and then Rome, and churches are starting all over the Roman Empire. But what exactly was a church is super hard to figure out, and scholars have been working on this for a very long time. And as usual, when we don't have a lot of information, we tend to project our desires, anxieties, criticisms, and onto the picture to sort of get what we want to imagine. Obviously, over centuries, this starts to develop. Remember, centuries are 100 years, and in some ways, it's not a very long time, and in other ways, it is a very long time. I referenced earlier this week this video I made about He's Everything to Me, song written in 1964 by Ralph Carmichael. And when I used that earlier, I referenced a video that you can find if you just type in YouTube, He's Everything to Me. You'll find this really pre-hippie campfire scene. It's pre-Jesus movement in Southern California with people dressed in ways that Cal Zeldin would definitely approve, even though they're at the beach and they're just sort of cozying up and enjoying singing campfire songs. Sherry mentioned that in her video yesterday. I'm going to make mention of Northwest Estuary Bird's Eye View. That was on Grail Country. Really wonderful conversation that they had. Again, continuing to unpack the Northwest Estuary event. Very early on, if you ask the Orthodox what's important, if you look at, say, what they tend to forefront in terms of what they say is most important, it's the liturgy, the liturgy, the liturgy. If you talk to Roman Catholics, and I haven't done any research to figure out sort of where this arises in the Middle Ages, you can imagine, though, in cultures that don't have terribly high rates of literacy, the Eucharist, the Eucharist, the Eucharist. It's the one thing that's sort of at the center of the Roman Catholic liturgy. And in fact, it's something that provokes the Protestant Reformation, because if you look at, I forget the name of the author, if you look at his great courses on the Protestant Reformation, which was a good one, he mentions that in medieval Europe, most medieval Christians maybe celebrated the Eucharist once a year, and that would only be the wafer and not the wine. And of course, you had the rail dividing the clergy from the laity. And of course, in the Protestant Reformation, much of the Protestant Reformation, the Anglicans are, of course, always going back and forth over the rail. You've got all of the people taking communion, and then how often to take communion, and these conversations still vary. So again, the Orthodox are the liturgy, the liturgy, the liturgy. The Catholics are the Eucharist, the Eucharist, the Eucharist. The Protestants come along and develop a very heady form. It's the preaching of the word. It's the teaching of the word. It's the communion of the saints. In the Christian Reformed Church, we have three marks of the church: preaching of the word, administration of the sacraments, and discipline. And these are the three marks that my church tradition has tended to emphasize. If you look at questions of communal formation, broad communal formation, leadership development, one of the things that stands clear is the role of the monasteries. The monastery became a shelter for learning. It became a shelter for books. It became a shelter for libraries. It became a shelter for making manuscripts and reproducing books. And the monastery carried a lot of the church formation that was needed. Of course, you can go back and you can find Plato's Academy, the gymnasium. You had earlier forms of, let's say, we call it education, but in many ways it's leadership development, because societies understood that leaders need to be formed in order for them to fulfill their role in society. Apprenticeship models, as technology rose, abound as well. But in the church, a lot of that formation came out of monasteries. And of course, eventually you get things like seminaries and universities that form. You can just look at the history of the Christian Reformed Church. So the Christian Reformed Church comes to North America. It does not want to be influenced by Americanization. It wants to sort of maintain itself. But many of these, as is the case in the Americas, many of the Dutchmen came from poorer areas of the Netherlands with secessionist churches and developed their own educational system apart from the American schools. One of the things that separated the Reformed Church in America from the Christian Reformed Church is that the Christian Reformed Church created their own day schools, because they didn't trust American public schools they basically assumed that American public schools were going to corrupt the youth. And so Christian Reformed Church starts all of these day schools. The Reformed Church in America sort of had this missiological vision for public schools, and in some ways that conversation continues even today. So the Christian Reformed Church creates day schools. Three of my four grandparents got an 8th grade education in school, and as was not uncommon for people born in the first part of the 20th century, many people got only an 8th grade education, and then my grandfather was off to the mill. My grandmother, what did my grandmother do? Worked in her sister and brother-in-law's store until they were married, and then my grandfather continued to work in the mill until the day he retired, and my grandmother stayed at home and volunteered in the church and did all of those things. So that was a very 20th century pattern. My grandfather's formation came mostly through the church. It came through evening Heidelberg Catechism sermons. It came through reading. It came through paying attention to the church. Now, my father's father was a minister. And so what that meant was, after going to Christian day school, then they had sort of a Christian prep school. And I've been reading, let's see if I'm using a different camera. It's supposed to do this a lot better. ZV-E10. Yeah, look at that. That's working. Good for it. So with this book, you very much read about the fact that in Chicago and New Jersey, outside of Iowa and West Michigan, Chicago and New Jersey were probably the most important CRC colonies early on. And so the building that I went to junior high in between North 7th and 8th Street in Prospect Park, New Jersey, had a big across the top. Even when I went to school, it was called Peterson Academy. That was their high school for a while. And earlier in the 20th century, Prospect Park, New Jersey, tiny little borough right next to Peterson, was also called Dutch Hill because it was like 90% of the people that lived in Prospect Park, New Jersey, were Christian Reformed. And so they went to 8th grade, and then in the 20th century, Chicago and New Jersey develop a Christian high school. Grand Rapids is late to the scene because Grand Rapids had sort of produced a prep school that my grandfather went to in order to get into what would become Calvin Theological Seminary. So all of these things are developing in terms of Christian formation and in terms of leadership. And then that Christian prep became Calvin College. Calvin College was initially primarily interested first in training ministers, people ready for then seminary education. They pretty much took the patterns from Europe, from Kampen, later the Free University, and in the Netherlands. And so then developed Calvin College, which was to train Christian Reformed ministers in preparation for Calvin Seminary, and then Christian day school teachers to go out and work in the various day schools all over the Christian Reformed Church. That was the network that was developing in the 20th century, and Henry Kuiper was an important leader in that process. But now, after even before the Second World War, Calvin College continues to sort of develop this liberal arts philosophy. And if you read George Marsden in his work, the liberal arts philosophy sort of starts to take over from the Christian sectarian philosophy that had governed higher education. And as almost everybody knows, most of the private major universities in the United States, the Ivy League, were all Christian denomination sectarian institutions. And they, of course, then continued to evolve after the Second World War. You can read George Marsden on this process. These churches, these universities, you'll still find often that they have these cathedrals at their center, but increasingly the focus receded from theology and began studying English, and then, of course, sciences, and then social sciences, and all of this came to be. Now, what we've been seeing, and Jordan Peterson is in many ways an example of what's been happening in the universities. In this alternative media space, there's been tremendous conversation about the corruption of the universities, the cost of the university system, the lack of ability of the university system to work in preparation for leaders. Peter Thiel, of course, had his little scholarship program where he would pay people to stop working in the university and start working in the business world. One of the things that you see is that, so I have some of my, one of the things that you see, even especially in the tech field, is that you might get a degree in mathematics or engineering or even something very applied. But the assumption is when you go out and look for a job, they're looking at university training as much for figuring out aptitude and discipline, because if you actually manage to get through and get a degree, it says something about your conscientiousness. Jordan Peterson comes along and, with all of the study that they've done, he's saying, well, we can measure some of these traits with the Big Five personality profile. And remember, much of Jordan Peterson's professional work was in psychometrics. In the video that I released this morning where I was talking to John Pepola, I said in some ways Jordan Peterson's story is a cautionary tale. Well, why do I say that? Well, this is something that if you've listened to the program quite a bit, you'll note that I think major losses for Jordan, and I think for the culture, were the loss of Jordan Peterson as a university professor, as a research academic, and as a clinical psychologist. Those seem to have been fields that he excelled in and enjoyed. And of course, all of that is broken up. And here in this conversation with Brett Weinstein and Heather Hying, they get into education because, of course, what happened at Evergreen was a big part of what happened with Brett and Heather Hying. And so there's a reassessment of the university system in many respects. And so Peterson has now launched Peterson Academy. So let's go back to the video and hear what he has to say.
So one of the things we're wrestling with at Peterson Academy, obviously, is I see no reason. I don't see much distinction, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't see much distinction between lecturing to 1,000 people and lecturing to, say, 100,000 people. Once you get past the expanse where it's seminar-like, somewhere past that, they become roughly equivalent. Now, the problem.
Okay, and I pause it there again. As I mentioned before, part of what has been happening in churches with respect to the rise of mega churches is that, fairly quickly on with mega churches realized that it was the celebrity pastor and certain very highly gifted and uniquely gifted individuals with the preaching of the word. And of course, the other, as Paul Ann Leitner has noted, the other sacrament in Protestantism is music. And in many mega churches, I remember going to a Rick Warren conference in the late 90s and Rick Warren saying, yeah, I was doing okay as a preacher, but when we brought in our music leader, that's when the church took off. And everyone who aspires to plant a mega church knows the most critical thing you need is a great band that is tuned in to a certain demographic to give the feels and set the setting for the sermon. Crusades knew this. Billy Graham knew this. This has been true for a very long time. English hymnody was vitally important in the evangelization of newly industrialized England. And a lot of those hymns are still with us. So what happened then with megachurches is, okay, we've got this highly gifted preacher. We can maybe grow, we can build a sanctuary. Then suddenly they have to have these huge building projects because now we need buildings that can host 4, 5, 6, 7,000 people. Now you're looking at a minor stadium. Joel Osteen, for example, bought the place that the Houston Rockets used to play. Very quickly also, because of Protestantism, and of course Catholics work this too, TV evangelists. So it's one thing to have your charismatic guy there in the building and you sort of craft the entire church around them. It's another thing to say, put the guy out over TV. And now here we are on YouTube. Put the guy out over YouTube. You can have a bigger crowd. Okay. And then one of the things that mega churches started doing is multi-site. And so now all of these things they were doing at the same time. One was to try to replicate the charismatic leader. And so, gosh, I've still got a lot of these books. If you read a lot of the church growth books from the 80s, 90s, and aughts, a lot of them had to do with business models for growing corporations and how to try to reproduce whatever the secret sauce was of the celebrity minister that was able to grow his church into the thousands. And so one of the things that has been tried, and in fact, if you look at the Atheist Church reports from our friend that was on the channel, a lot of these churches then go to multi-site churches where, well, then they play around with the formula. Some of them, it's just a theater. You just watch church on the theater. For others, it's you have a local band, and you might even have a local pastor, and you might have local small groups, but for the message itself, it's on the screen. Now Jordan has been, for a long time, I've been talking about some of the similarities between Jordan, Billy Graham, megachurch. And Jordan's been playing around with these things because, of course, his lectures on YouTube, once he had that political elevation to his fame, he had YouTube, but then, of course, he rents out the Bader Theater in Toronto and packs it for his biblical series. And then he continues to develop his channel. He goes over to Daily Wire. He has these tours. And so Peterson has sort of this roving evangelist thing going. Early on, he had Dave Rubin, so tried to warm up the crowd with some comedy. And then he would have some music. And now he's continuing to sort of reformulate this kind of Protestant, because Peterson doesn't have a Eucharist. He doesn't really have a liturgy, and that's why I know people say, no, he's Orthodox. No, he's Catholic. And while he's got Orthodox friends and says appreciative things about the Orthodox, and he's got Catholic friends, and his wife is Catholic and says appreciative things about the Catholics, his main focus has been deeply Protestant. And if you're going to see him through the lens of church terms, he's fundamentally Protestant. And so he's playing with these now with, let's say, the anticipated collapse of the university system, and universities, especially Christian colleges. This is an important point. Christian colleges are in deep distress. Now, some conservative colleges, and he'll mention Hillsdale, some conservative colleges are doing very well. In the Christian Reformed Church, Dordt College is doing well. There's sort of a conservative counterpart that the Iowa is sort of the loyal opposition to Grand Rapids, has been for a long time. Dordt College in Iowa is doing very well. A lot of Christian Reformed families that were concerned about liberal evolution in the Christian Reformed Church would send their kids to Dordt instead of Calvin. Dordt is not owned by the Christian Reformed Church as Calvin is. That's going to be something that's up for a lot of debate in the near term. Jordan is now playing around with, okay, universities are collapsing. Christian colleges are in deep trouble. Colleges are now, in many ways, status symbols. You go to a deeply conservative Christian college because you're a deeply conservative Christian. I'll let the Roman Catholics talk about what has happened to the Roman Catholic, both university and especially high school prep systems. But if you want to go to college, you really want to get an Ivy League degree because that still has value. But a college like Calvin College, which really tried to give excellent academic preparation. And I've known enough people who've gone to Ivy League that have basically said, the quality of the education that you experience at the Ivy League will not necessarily be higher. In fact, there's a lot of talk about grade inflation in these places because increasingly that entire game is about status. And so you dare not give a student anything less than an A. And this is particularly bad in graduate programs. And so the whole grading system upon which GPA is based is quite corrupt and disrupted. And so basically it's all become gaming to get into an Ivy League school so you can get an Ivy League degree so that you have a leg up because the Ivy League still has some cachet. But if you're a small private college and you don't have a loyal user base, usually because of a religious community, you are in real trouble. Now, some of you might have seen my conversation with Julian. And Julian and I talked about quite of these things, not Jordan Peterson, Julian of the corner. And he wasn't comfortable with me putting that even behind the paywall, but it is unlisted and he has shared it with some friends. So if you're friends with Julian and you want to see it, you can ask him nicely and maybe he'll give you the link. But Christian colleges are in deep trouble because Christian colleges were dependent on denominational loyalty, and denominational loyalty in the last 50, 60 years has been tanking because denominations no longer sort of have these closed insular systems that created the market for their Christian colleges. For a while now, for 30 years now, Christian denominations have been hiding. It's rather unusual. So most of you hear about Livingstone's Church. The full name of my church is Livingstone's Christian Reformed Church. The former name of my church is Sacramento Christian Reformed Church. We stopped that because we have more Christian Reformed churches in Sacramento. Traditionally, it would have been First Sacramento Christian Reformed Church. Denominations have been losing Baptist, Christian Reformed, Presbyterian from their names. And of course, these go back and forth. If you lose them too fast, people then play them because Protestants are deeply market driven. So colleges are disappearing. And you've got Ralston College, which is taking sort of the opposite approach to Peterson, where you're going to bring in, just like Peterson, top university professors. You're going to go to Greece. You're going to go to Turkey. You're going to travel the world. Well, sounds awesome. Sounds expensive and not terribly scalable. Many people in this corner found this corner because they had tech. Listen to Sam Tiedemann's, what conversation did he say all this stuff in? I don't remember recently, but he talked about the fact that he's a tech guy. And for certain parts of his job, he's got some mindless tasks he has to do. And there's a fair amount of his brain that's unused. And so he would look around YouTube for university lectures and he would listen to them. There's another guy in our Jordan Peterson meetup circle here in Sacramento who that's how he found Jordan Peterson, like 2014. He's like, oh, wow, this guy has some really good lectures. This guy's a really good lecturer. And Jordan Peterson was putting it out there. Peterson notes that with Peterson Academy, a significant percentage of the people are not university students. They're people like us who, wow, just, let me pull up Peterson Academy. Let's see.
I had another question in my head.
Wrong one. So Peterson Academy, and hey, I look at this lineup and I see, Peterson on Nietzsche. Like to see that. Introduction to nutrition. Super curious. Intro to psychology. Don't know who Keith Campbell is, but I'd give it a look. Art of storytelling. And notice, Peterson has been bragging about the production quality. And yeah, these are very intriguing. And And you notice that he's working in this other space. James Oran, Plato. Warren Farrell, The Boy Crisis. And of course, most of us know John Vervaeke, Jonathan. Where's Peugeot? Peugeot was in here. Hey, what happened to Peugeot? They're always running metrics. They know what gets clicks, and they have all the metrics. Now, these are 8-hour courses. If you have 1 hour, 3 days a week, 12 weeks a quarter, it's a lot more than 8 hours. So Peterson's playing with this, and that's classic Jordan Peterson. He's playing with these. He's trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? Now, what I really liked about this
Recorded lectures like the ones that you guys offered is that they take away the dynamism of the interaction between the professors and the students in the moment, right? And that's some of that transformation that you...
Okay, so the dynamism. So what Peterson notes, because of course he's got a lot of experience with this, that the interaction, and this is the same thing happening with preachers and mega churches and preachers on screens and all of this, why it's not every mega church with a star preacher has multi-site. Because if you're watching the dude on a screen, well, the big screen's kind of nice and watching with other people can be fun, but the little screen works just as well. And while you've got this pre-adulthood that we've carved out for college, many of us, we're lifelong learners and we want to keep learning and we want to keep being formed. And yeah, that's true. Well, William Branch, by the way, is, I think, by far now has more comments on my channels than everything. I am amazed at how many comments William puts out there. Just amazing. John the Alcohol already has Symbolic World Academy. That's right. And so this isn't just Jordan playing with this. Everyone's playing with this. So Peter Zion has these little 8-minute videos where he talks about this or he talks about that. And I've been watching those for a while now. And I really enjoy them because it gives me little windows into other parts of the world and things I don't think about. And he just had this video recently about, I don't remember what the topic of the video was about, but he said, well, I've been doing these videos for a while, and first I had the newsletter, so now I'm going to have a Patreon, and we're going to have Patreon videos, and it's like, yeah, same game. We're all getting into the same game, because what the Christian colleges always knew, and what the Christian communities always knew, and what the Christian Reformed Church always knew, is that what the Roman Catholic churches always knew, is that human formation creates human community, and human community creates the world. I have no idea what that means.
You described. The benefit, of course, I think, is that because we can curate that, while there's reach and cost, those are major benefits, right? But there's also the case that we can very carefully curate the lecturers so we can make sure that they're of the highest possible quality. Now, what we want to do in addition to that is we want to set up a social landscape. Like one of the things we'd like to see at Peterson Academy is that the students, once there's enough student enrollment, assuming that happens, that people do set up, social occasions like watch parties, where 20 or 30 people could get together and watch a...
Now, when Chad was working this video over this morning on the Friday Morning Nameless, he was talking about the fact that we've done all this. I mean, Discord servers have done watch parties. Now, of course, if you've got the rights, if you own the material, part of what we struggle with on Discord is, okay, we want to watch this movie. We want to watch Deadwood together, and we want to talk about it. And in this video, he talks about the fact that, he'd really love to do a course on Pinocchio, but Disney has so corrupted the copyright system to try to keep the mouse and things that Disney created from public domain materials and put them behind a copyright wall, and they want to keep them there forever, has done it. So
lecture when it first emerges, and we're trying to also figure out how to incorporate. You can imagine a 3-day convention, for example, where we bring several thousand people together or more than that with a dozen professors and run it for 3 days. And
look at what we've been doing with the development of our live estuary conferences. And in fact, the nomenclature, the naming continues. We've got the Northwestuary. We just had the Northwestuary, and we're going to have the Midwestuary in Chicago. Estuary is just a word that's nicely. I wish I could claim brilliance for this, but it's a word that can be put all. I don't have any fast name. There's still. My sister said there are 3 spots left for the Quinbrook Farms Estuary Retreat coming up in mid-October. So we're almost full. There's only 15 slots. But we're all playing with this. And I think the question of why are we playing with this? This isn't just about university. This isn't just this little container where we try to form 18 to 22-year-olds so that they can get a job. This is very much the domain of the church and the monastery and community and the religious community. And part of the reason I had my conversation with John Pippola yesterday, and I was tempted to leave it in No 8 No Ads for a little while and make some clips of it. I've just been busy. I can't make as many videos as I'd like to. And I know some of you are really scared about that, because if I could make as many videos as I'd like to, my channel would be in even worse shape. But I played that because when I was talking to him, I was realizing that he's trying to move the needle on politics. Many people are using this space to move the needle on politics. Churches, one of the things about churches is that their highest value is not politics. And so when churches become all about politics, the churches get corrupt. And, when you listen to Peterson talk about, things at the top, he's right about that. And Peterson has figured out a lot of the reasons why religion.
We want to flesh out the social element, and that's partly why we concentrated a lot on the development of the social media network too. So, because obviously what you get at university is the provision of information in books and textbooks and lectures, but there's a peer component.
Okay, so the provision of information. Now notice, again, before the printing press, books disrupt the monastery. A lot of other things were working on the monasteries too. Corruption, wealth. Books disrupt the monastery and democratize information. And the universities begin to scale up because a lot of this information and skills need to be distributed more broadly for culture to work. Of course, in the 20th century, then, universities need to create engineers. Universities are needed for the industrial complex, for the military complex, for all of these major institutions that get developed in the 20th century and into the 21st century. And the university is the way that this happens. But again, so many things are happening in the university. The university becomes places where revolutions are fomented. It's in the Iranian Revolution in the 70s. It was Iranian students on college campuses in the 60s and 70s. You had unrest. You've seen some of that again in more recent student movements. And so, of course, a lot of talk about the fact that ideological and political diversity was wrung out of the universities. And so diversities have become fairly monolithic, and that monolithic quality has degraded and impaired the ability of the universities to adequately prepare young people for entry into the marketplace. And so adolescence is being disrupted, religious communities are being disrupted, the formation systems of religious communities are being disrupted. And right now, everyone is sort of throwing things against the wall to figure out what sticks. What will this stuff do? And even this event, which they talk about in this video, this event in Washington, D.C., I think there again, I noticed the see, normally when I make a video, I pause, do all this stuff, come back. But I noticed with this crossing the Delaware image that they had on Brett's website about this event that's going to happen in Washington, D.C., they have Trump in the boat. And it was so interesting because I thought, that Trump has been diminished by the fact that he has to share a mural with a bunch of other people, and he's not the one most prominent. It's got to really, the question about the degree to which Donald Trump can be a collaborative partner instead of a directive CEO is really interesting. Anyway, even what Brett is trying to do in Washington with this event, and you listen to him talk in this video about, I don't really quite know how to describe this event. We don't have words for a lot of the stuff that we're developing. So we've got institutions sort of collapsing and new rituals developing. That course from Vervaeke on ritual is going to be outstanding. The conversation that Jonathan and John did on ritual was just outstanding. And understanding ritual is key in understanding the creation of institutions, because in many ways, institutions are sort of liturgy expanded and tradition articulated and formalized and codified.
And a mentorship component that's more difficult to duplicate online.
See, there again, all of the things that we pay no attention to that happen in a healthy university system. We have professors with office hours, and they are the kinds of mentors for students. Internship, again, the rise of internships in terms of the necessity of finding work. I mean, all of this stuff is happening right now. It's an enormously active situation.
But I don't think it's impossible, especially because the universities have dropped the ball in that regard. They're not very good at actually facilitating the social element in higher education. They're not good at fostering the development of productive peer networks. They sort of let that happen by happenstance.
So we're noticing what universities do, and often we notice what is really happening when we watch things fail, because we didn't realize that these institutions had these functions and these effects and were producing these things until the institution fails and it's no longer producing these things. If you look at Dallas Willard's The Divine Conspiracy and how he opens the book, Dallas Willard, of course, taught philosophy at USC and was deeply interested in Christian formation. He begins that book talking, again, about all the same issues here, about the collapse of the university. And that's why, again, when I began to realize what Jordan Peterson was doing, I very much thought about Dallas Willard, because again, Dallas Willard was working these things in the church. Dallas Willard was talking about Christian formation in the church. And now all of this language that I hear from Vervaeke about practices and formation, this is stuff we've been talking about in the church for 30 years, because in many ways, even though the church often feels behind. And if you look, it's so interesting. If you look at the mainline churches, the mainline church always has the sense that we're behind the culture. Yeah, it depends on what you're looking at, because in many ways, a lot of the conservative churches have been ahead of the culture, but you have to sort of know where to look to see where they're ahead. And you usually only see it until you find the culture catching up and you begin to realize, oh yeah, Jordan Peterson is working on what Dallas Willard talked and wrote about 20, 30 years ago. And of course, Jordan Peterson was probably thinking and doing it then as well, but we didn't know him.
I think we can do a better job. And so works. They sort of let that facilitating the social element in higher education. They're not good at fostering the development of productive peer networks. They sort of let that happen by happenstance. So I think we can do a better job. And so we're very, very cognizant of that particular problem. And, it's a major focus of address as we move forward. But we've got all sorts of things planned for
Now, Michaela, I don't know if she's not posted many videos lately, but came in my feed this morning, her presentation, her and Jordan at a Senate hearing with respect to medicine and nutrition. I don't know what all, but of course, Michaela's going to tell her story and talk about her diet, et cetera, et cetera. But in her introduction, she says, founder and co-CEO of Peterson Academy. Now, Michaela Peterson is smart. I've never had a conversation with Michaela. I've had some emails with her, but that was a long time ago. Michaela, I don't know if she finished her college degree, if she at least started it, but from everything that I've heard about Michaela, she is sharp and smart and really smart at business. And so when in front of a Senate hearing, Michaela identifies herself as with Peterson Academy right up there at the front, it's like, you smarty. I mean, you could name probably a dozen things that you and your father have started and run and so on and so forth, but you forefront this. And when Jordan says we're, the question is, who's we? Jordan and Michaela? Now, Jordan is a guy who likes input, and he is always looking at signals. And we know he very much looks at how many subs. He very much looks at social impact. He's a social scientist, and he's a social scientist that studies signals. And so he's always looking at signals. And so I'm quite sure Jordan is asking around a lot. And it may very well be that someone in Jordan's circle watches this video because he studies, he learns, and so does Michaela. And every time, I've only had really 2 private conversations with Jordan backstage from his events. And in both cases, I've brought friends with me who I knew would be enormously excited to meet Jordan and could really use a word of encouragement and advice from Jordan. And so actually the 2, or has it been 3? I don't remember. But the times that I've had a chance to sit down with Jordan, I've forefronted my friends and their needs because I can get a lot of what I get from Jordan just from watching his videos. And that doesn't mean that, anyway. But every time I meet with Jordan privately, and we usually have about a half hour together, and there's a couple other people in the room. I guess it's been 3 times. Every time I get with Jordan, I was thinking about my conversation with John yesterday because I think about my first conversation with Jonathan Peugeot. I'm a nosy pastor, and I very much like to sort of turn the tables and interview, even if someone is asking me to come on and be interviewed. Jordan, every time I meet with Jordan, Jordan peppers me with questions about, what do I think about this? How do you think the show went? What do you see? What do you do? So Jordan is always getting feedback. And so he's working on these things. And I know early on, I remember when Jordan rose, I thought, I didn't even have the words. How is Jordan going to institutionalize? How is Jordan going to democratize? Because, and that's again, part of the reason I sort of started with the meetups and then estuary because I saw the need within the Jordan Peterson movement for someone to do a lot of this work on the ground. And now with Peterson Academy, he's doing this. And of course, a la Jordan, Jordan very much believes there should be sort of he's doing it in a business wrapper. Now again, I'm used to working in a church wrapper, and how churches and businesses deal with money are very different. And even when I talked about, let's say, what happened with education, you go from the church to the university, now to this thing right now. The same is true of you go from the church to therapy. Pastors have always sort of done something like therapy. You go from church to education. Churches always still do education. You go from church to business to NGOs, nonprofit organizations. And they're sort of like this middle ground between church and businesses. And so Jordan has spoken in a number of videos about figuring out how to price Peterson Academy. And it's so funny because now that I'm thinking more seriously about having regular events on site here at Living Stones that are estuary. Pricing is just a big thing of mine. And I've been playing with pricing on my Quinbrook Farms estuary retreat. And, Sam said it couldn't be done. I've been talking about this for a week or so, and we're still not full yet. And if it doesn't fill up, I won't be dissatisfied. I won't be dissatisfied at all. I'm happy. If only 2 or 3 people signed up for that retreat, I would be more than happy. My sister would be upset because, she's trying to, is it a business that my sister runs? She's another preacher's kid. But she's, she wants to rent out rooms and she wants to do some of that. And I talked her down in the price a little bit. But pricing is super hard. And I actually thought pricing for Peterson Academy was less than I imagined. But they're going to keep playing with that too. And the whole social media side.
Person events. And given that the cost of our, what we hope will develop into a full high-level university equivalent education, the cost is so low, we should be able to offer people relatively special experiences to go.
And, when he says university equivalent education, I really don't know what that means. I've seen people with college degrees that can't spell, can't do math. When I look at what they're doing here, let's see if I can get when I look at what they're doing here, is this so different from YouTube? I don't know. One of these days, I'm probably going to pull the trigger and sign up for this sucker and watch some of them. It's just that, the problem is, will I watch them? That's the question. The only way I'll know is to try. So, upcycle. Email me, my friend. Email me. Mid-November, I have an estuary. I'm helping launch an estuary in Bellingham with President Foxman November 10. So I probably can't do another estuary retreat in November. Right now from Living Stones, I get 4 Sundays a year that I can do estuary things on. So Upcycle knows how to use it. Poor CW is going to be upset. Knows how to use a super chat. So what is happening? What is he doing? And, Chad starts out his thing today and says, we've already been doing this. And we have. Sam Tiedemann made a comment about, he's a little disappointed that he hasn't seen the level of conversation progress in the corner. And I thought, yeah, because I went back and I played the Peugeot Vervaeke, an earlier conversation. And it's fun listening to those old conversation. Clara. See, part of what we have here, because we're not too big, is I know who Clara is, and I know who Upcycle is, and I know who, Gabby, and I got to meet Joy at the Northwestuary, and that was a true joy. Church rapper. So when okay, pull ADHD PVK, pull back here, focus, concentrate. I mentioned to Sam, it's really hard to evaluate. I didn't say all this because it was a response. It's really hard to evaluate the quality of a conversation because so much of it is just in time. But I watch Chad almost every day. Chad calls me on the phone when he's got an idea, or he texts me. I mean, Chad is working with me to a bit on the Midwestuary. When I look at the growth and development in Chad, I want to play another little clip from the Northwestuary.
But I don't remember what it was. I don't write stuff down. It's like whenever I do anything like this on Grail Country, say, and now I'm like,
I'm even fringe within the fringe. No.
So Megan is Karen Wong's daughter, and she came to the Northwestuary conference, and she's not very conversant in the corner at all. She hasn't watched the videos. And again, a big issue in our corner has been on-ramping, because we already have all of this insider language. We have cornerese that we speak, and to catch up to this thing is really hard, and there's so much going on. And so what's been interesting about the in-person events is that in-person events have proven to be one of the better on-rampings that we have.
Yeah. Thanks, Tracy. Thank you.
So poor Sherry didn't include Megan in in the question. So Megan got overlooked. So she's like, "There's fringes in the fringe here."
It reminded me of something that I brought up in our S Story group too. Like thinking about what is real, and like when I got home from this conference, like the second I was alone, I just like sobbed for like probably an hour straight. And it was like the exact same feeling as when I in junior high and high school, I used to go to this camp up in Oregon. I was a marching band geek, so very much fringe kind of person. And I always felt fringe even in my own band at home. And I always felt fringe in school and in friend groups and everything. Like, and so going to these camps, like I felt seen and mirrored, like at a younger age. And this was that exact same feeling. Like my therapist calls me a meaning maker. I call it like horses on a racetrack in my head at all times. Like every single thing that happens, I'm just like, my head is spinning, like trying to make sense of it, trying to put a name to it, like trying to make sense of other people's actions. I've ever felt like with these people, with this environment, which is a small percentage of the world, I think. I don't think, it's just hard to find people that are thinking so deeply in this same way. And so, yeah, it was like when I was up there, I was trying to go outside and just breathe as deeply as I could through my nose, like as many times as possible, because that scent is like so intoxicating to me, and like that is the most real scent in the world to me. Like that smell of like all encompassing like pine and cedar and nature and all that kind of stuff. And so in that sense, to me, it was like, this is the most real I've ever felt, like with these people, with this environment. But something I was thinking about in our estuary group too was, like if you think about, 50 years ago or something in like the Midwest, like there's this idea of the barn raising. Like there's your community, and it's a bunch of people that you probably know really well because you've lived there a long time, and you all don't always see eye to eye, but what you do see eye to eye on is that you take care of each other as a community.
I think Megan hit so many of the important points, because it isn't just education, it isn't just colleges have been important in creating cohorts. I see that in my ministerial career, that for a long time, and this has sort of been disrupted, for a long time, your ministerial cohort are the people that you went through seminary with, and you have a special relationship with them. And especially now that I'm getting into late 50s, early 60s, where you sort of get to the top of the institutional pile, suddenly all of those relationships that I made at seminary. So I have relationships with the people who are the heads of various institutions, and they have relationships with me. And so that when they email me, I open their email, because this is, well, an example at the Northwestuary, Mark Van Heitzma, one of my closer friends at college and seminary. We were going to be roommates because I was going to go out to Fuller with him. And then I met the woman who would be my wife, and I didn't want to have that relationship go long term. So on and on and on and on. So
along with it, that'll fill that vacuum. So yeah, so Brett, the part of the solution to the problem that you raised with regards to the proliferation of evolutionary actors, let's say in the pathological space, is cost of entry, right? It could be that free social media networks are doomed from the outset. And I think there's got to be something to that. And tell me what you think about that.
I don't think they're doomed from the outset. We've pretty much done what we've done mostly with free. Now, when you get to conferences, there are costs. And so conferences cost money, but most of the corner has been pretty free. And again, there are limits to free, and there are good things. But again, look at the Silk Road. Look at the Symbolic World, and they have classes. The Silk Road is going to have, I'm sure they're going to have classes. And if you want to, I would imagine John Vervaeke is going to have other people accompanying him on his Silk Road journey. I can think of 10 ways to monetize that sucker. So, and again, as Chad said, we're doing a thing. I mean, this is sort of the learning community. I mean, the nice thing about TLC is 3 letters you can put a lot of words to. It is this little corner. It is a learning community. It is, and we've played around with a lot of different things. So I am going to drop the link, and let's talk about this. Now, I'm going to try to limit 6 or 7 people to the screen, and I want to use Fishbowl rules. What do I mean by Fishbowl rules? Fishbowl rules, we did a Fishbowl thing at the Breakwater event where come on the screen, participate. There'll probably be some people down backstage that want to get in, and can't get in. And so when you've got something you'd like to participate, come in, throw in your two cents, participate in the discussion, but let's try and keep people flowing in and flowing out so that we don't get too clogged up. Here we have our first, Neil.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Good morning, afternoon. How are you, Neil?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. What are your thoughts on this? Now you're coming to the I saw
too much FOMO. Too much FOMO.
I saw your name and I was so excited because we've never met in person. We've never really had extended conversation in person. And so I'm super happy you're going to be there because I think I know who's going to be there. There's a few people's names I'm not as familiar with, but there's a bunch of people there that I'm very familiar with. And it's going to be, if the Northwestuary was full of thoroughbreds, these are some Triple Crown winners in this group. So, all right, Neil, you go first.
Yeah. So I was having this discussion with Chad, and we were debating it a little bit about Peterson Academy and whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm always thinking about the steepness of the slope. And I think what we do in this space, there's a set of basic minimum requirements needed to participate in this space. And one of those, there's sort of the left brain minimum set of requirements, and there's the right brain minimum set of requirements. And I would say the right brain minimum requirement is the willingness to die to self in a social context. And that's the willingness to relinquish the floor, the willingness to sacrifice whatever's on your mind or whatever's your topic and pick up whatever ball is being tossed around. And it's the participatory game thing that Peterson's talking about in relation to little kids. Like, can they participate in whatever other kids are playing? And a lot of adults, I think fewer and fewer adults know how to do that well in a social setting. And so that's the right brain side. But the left brain side, it's very hard. I mean, without going through dozens and dozens of hours of this really dense content. And so I suspect that something like the Peterson Academy might be the ultimate on-ramp because it passes the conscientiousness filter of whether or not someone can actually stick with hard ideas and engage with those ideas for a long period of time. Now, at some point, it's really teaching you how to think and how to formulate reasons and basically. So let me give you an example. So I don't think this class could be taught today, and then I'll surrender the floor. So the best class I ever took in college was something called Current Moral and Social Issues. And I went to Rutgers, and Rutgers was like #1 philosophy school. And little did I know that at the time. So this professor would come in so we had like lectures on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it was about 40 people in the class. And he would come in, and on Tuesday, he would basically give a lecture animated, the strongest possible arguments pro-life that could be formulated. And he would give his heart and soul into that on Tuesday. And you'd leave the class going like, wow, he is really pro-life, this guy. Wow. And then he would come back on Thursday and he would give the strongest possible arguments for pro-choice. And so you'd leave these classes and you'd go like, what am I? And then we'd go into a workshop and he would say, okay, I don't care what position you take, but these are the reading materials. Take a position, defend that position. You're learning how to think, basically. Can you steelman the strongest possible arguments on both sides? And I see that being less and less common, that schools are able to entertain the totality of anything, let alone the current moral and social issues. That class, there's no way that could fly today. There's no way. So the question is, will Peterson Academy, there's two questions really. Will Peterson Academy be able to emulate that such that they will be able to create the social atmosphere to encourage creative thought, difficult topics, and basically the capacity to think deeply? And then the second question is, after graduation, what happens? And Chad was like, well, there's going to be the Peterson alumni and da, 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 da. And I'm like, maybe that's fine, but maybe it's like, oh, I want to go into postgrad. And what's postgrad? Well, let's wade into the deep waters of all the Christian ideas, or not even Christian ideas, but way bigger than that. And that's what I think we are. So
and this topic with you is interesting because you've spoken a lot about your fraternity experience. And so your college was obviously partly the academics, but for many people, it's the dorm, it's the fraternity experience. I really like what you said there in terms of right brain social requirement, because I think part of what we've always talked about and wrestled with in the corner was to try to get our minds around whenever we have the what do we have here conversation. A lot of it, the question is, there's a culture in the corner. There's a spirit in the corner. And, sometimes people will identify me in terms of, and, rightly so, but also Peterson and Peugeot and Vervaeke and Chad and Grizz. I mean, Grizz has brought his spirit to the corner in a lot of ways. And one of the things that Chad and I talked about is if you would try to build this thing from the ground up, especially in sort of a business framework, would you have a guy with a lucha libre mask making branding? Would you have savings throws? Would you? And part of the culture of the corner is not something that anyone would have planned in a boardroom. And if they had, it would be legitimate cringy instead of the kind of lovable but sometimes unwatchable that we have. So, but I think you're really right in terms of the right brain, left brain in this, because the right brain stuff is far. I mean, we sort of systematize for the left brain because it's all in Amazon boxes. The right brain, you're exactly right. That's the art side of this. So,
and the stories that unfold in TLC, like the social dynamics and the stories, it's all right brain. It's all natural. Yeah. Like how do you formulate the mythology of a top-down Peterson social network? Like we have a mythology within this space.
That's right. That's right. You really have to grow it. You can't produce it. And I think that's, okay. So I don't think Chad and I have invented anything here, but I think all of us together have cultivated something and it has grown. Whoops. All right. Any other responses to Neil's thought there?
I wonder as well about like when Jesus talks about fasting and doing it in private, where there's a certain aspect where people are being educated in public for the public accolades of it and not for its actual benefit. And it's been very, very interesting because when I was finishing university, like I was being led in a pastoral direction, and University of Toronto had a program that was a master's in rabbinic studies, 1 year in Toronto, 2 years in Israel. You can imagine that I was very interested. But then I realized I only wanted to do it for me. It wasn't to be better for my community or to love people better. And it wasn't that I wasn't constantly surrounded in information that I was learning. I could continue learning and get a lot of that material without going to Israel. But I wanted to go because that seemed like a lot of fun and I could brag about it. And so I wonder about that aspect of the valuing it. Because there's a lot of people that my interest in Peterson Academy, I don't want anything. I just want to see it. I want to be able to be curious. That's it.
Yep. Yep. And you raise an important point, because in many families and in many communities, and this was very true in the Christian Reformed Church, communal formation and leadership development was a communal enterprise. You just don't go to college because you want to go to college. Your community sends you to college, helps pay for you to go to college, and holds you accountable because they've helped pay for you to go to college. When I went to Calvin Seminary, I basically had a free ride because my classes said, we want you to go to Calvin Seminary. And I went to Calvin Seminary partly because they said, we'll pay for it. It was like, oh, well, maybe I'll go. But in other words, this individualism we have now, where it's me seeking my thing for me. If you actually have a community, it's no. I don't care if you want to be a fireman. You need to go to this school and you need to do this because our community 30 years from now needs to have what the potential we see in you now. And so all of this is a function of a community. So, Alan, what say you?
Hey, party people. All the cool people are on the live chat or in the stream. So PVK, it's me and you 50-50, corner premium. I guarantee everyone dice from Grim Grizz. You send them dice, and we got to monetize. You know, we guarantee some conversations. We guarantee eye contact from PVK. We're making a fortune here. That's it.
That's a Gucci silver straw that he's sipping from right there.
Printed out headshots.
Real silver. Real silver.
Yeah, I mean,
Keeps away the vampires.
what could be less of a steep slope than just like monetizing this bad boy? TLC Premium Plus, okay? You know, we roll it into Hulu. You know, you get an automatic subscription with Hulu. I mean, we're talking branding. We're talking about authentic sweat from the luchador mask of Chad. I mean, it's not
True
this isn't
drops.
2 drops in a vial. You know, they send out holy water. I mean, the Catholics are way ahead of us on this bad boy. Okay.
How much
Let's
money
not-
does it cost to get chewed out by Jacob? That's a good question.
Yeah.
Is that the price of admission,
Yeah.
or do you pay for that
Um,
honor?
David, that comes
Wait,
when we take over It's a Small World ride and we just take in parts of, you know, each part of the corner. One stop on the It's a Small World ride is getting screamed at by Jacob, you know. You know.
That's
You
pretty
know,
good.
you get to kiss PVK's head, you know, it's sort of like a relic, you know. I mean, everybody gets to touch it. Good luck. I mean, come on, let's get serious, guys. We're not joking around here anymore.
All right. Well, there we have Alan's recommendation. I love I do love that's do you want eye contact? That'll be $5. $10 for a long stare.
You know,
This-
let's
This
get
is
real.
this is how they invented prostitution. We're all aware. What is going on? What are we talking about here?
Oh
Like
my gosh.
but I do actually wonder about it. Where if you're in like a church community and there's a Bible study, like I never got charged to be part of a Bible study. You just support the community, and the community is doing these things. And if they have someone who can teach something, then there's classes, and you just show up for them. I mean, sometimes they put it there as like sometimes it's just like to show your appreciation in special situations. Yeah, my fat cat is not around. He's hiding right now, but yeah.
All right. David, what say you?
Me? I talked a lot.
You didn't have, when you came in here, you didn't have a thought you wanted to share, or you just wanted to be on the screen?
No, I wanted to talk about exactly what I was talking about. The idea of like how the communities arise. I wouldn't pay to be a part of this community. I'm sorry, guys. I don't want to.
What the heck? Oh my
Right?
gosh.
I've never had to pay to be part of a friend group. Sorry.
He live streams on Jacob's Corner for free. I call it Jacob's Corner. He says he says he's not allowed to do it because there's already a Jacob's Corner. There's already a Jacob's Corner on the internet, so he can't call it that. But I disagree. It should be Jacob's Corner. So
I mean, the one thing I'll say to that, David, though, which is a little more serious, is that we're already paying. You know, I could have explained to Delta that I'm flying to be part of my friend group and that Monty's not a part of it, but Delta unfortunately didn't accept that as a reason to fly me to Olympia. The Uber driver did not accept meaningful conversations in lieu of money. So, it's like,
Well, but
I'm
that
not
is
saying it should
part of
be
what I was.
monetized, but I'm just saying, like, we're going to
Oh
pay
yeah,
one
no,
way or the other.
absolutely, you pay, and that goes back to what I was thinking about, like right before I came on. What I was thinking about is being part of communities where you have to support them in order for them to exist. But
Yeah.
but then it's just your community, and how you use it is completely up to you.
Yeah.
You don't have to attend the Bible study. You don't have to attend church on Sunday, but you earn your place within the community.
All right, Mark.
Yeah. I put my question in the chat, and William told me it was too busy to come on screen, so I'm here for William. Question was, right now Peterson Academy looks a lot like Masterclass, more narrow, but an awful lot like Masterclass. 8-hour classes aren't even really a full level undergraduate university, as you pointed out, in terms of just hours. But boy, if he started offering undergraduate level education in classical languages or philosophy or mathematics, I would pay double, triple a month what he's asking right now. Because all of those would be really hard for me to pursue at this point, even at the state college level. Because I don't know of any. These are all things I'd like to work on,
But the
and I need
question
some
is the
help.
delivery system.
That
How would he
language
do this?
acquisition
That's my
might be a little
question.
harder. Yeah.
I mean, are you looking for an in-person classroom experience, or are you going to watch videos? Because the question is, I mean, that's what they're playing around with, delivery system. We put people in a room and have talking and books. We all know that, and paying for that. Most of us have done that. But the question is, okay, so you're watching Jordan on a video, and then you're going to have multiple choice. At this point, it's all multiple choice. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, but one of the interesting things is that if University of Toronto hadn't sort of set Jordan aside, if Jordan tried to go back to lecturing in a classroom, what would happen? I'm really curious.
See, I think we're sidestepping the issue a little bit in that I think what we're doing here is more akin to School of Athens, in that everybody sets up shop and they have their best ways of thinking, best ways of knowing, because what is it that you're trying to learn in Peterson Academy? Like, what is it that you're actually trying to learn? And it's something like how to live. That's it. And we're sort of assuming that the way to live is, you learn stuff in a book, or you learn stuff from a lecturer, and then you know how to live. And I would say it's probably the opposite. Like, first you learn how to form relationships, and then based on those relationships, you grow your knowledge based on the things that people are teaching you, whatever those things are. It's almost like the Petersonian. Now, don't get me wrong. I've learned a ton from Peterson, but the Petersonian, like, you don't care if your son or daughter wins this game, because what you really care about is they get to play as many games as possible with as many people as possible. So winning the meta game of the interactions. And I think what I'm saying is, I think the social aspect, which is a secondary part of Peterson Academy because it's top down, is actually the primary thing. I think that's actually the primary thing that we lost. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
But the vision he's outlined is the claim is that he wants to have essentially upgrade or update or replace the current undergraduate university system. That he talks about credentialing, and if he can't get standard credentialing, he'll offer some form of credential that will tell future employers that this person has been through the Peterson Academy and successfully completed its minimum requirements to present to you a fully prepared employee. I mean, that's what I've seen him actually say, something along those lines. I don't
Yeah,
know if they're
and
backing
Mark,
away from that or not.
I want to add something to what you're saying, and then I'll check out as per Fishbowl rules. But I had a Hebrew professor, and in the class, someone asked if something that was being taught, if we were going to have a quiz in like a week or something, and he said we have to give you grades, otherwise you won't do the work. Said it'd be really great if we could just talk about these lovely things and gather together. But you need to be worried that you're going to be doing a test. Otherwise, you're not actually going to do the work. And look, I don't know more of Piaget than what Peterson has taught. I've gone through those lectures multiple times, but anything else Piaget, like what the reading was for those classes, I never did. Right? I know a lot about the Gulag Archipelago. I didn't finish it. If I had to read it for a class, I would have. Right? I read the Brothers Karamazov because I had a class that required it and I was tested on it. So there's this somehow in between where also we pay so that we actually have to finish the readings. That's part of what's happening as well.
So are you saying then the claim that I've described, that I am saying I've heard him talk about, his vision is not really going to be fulfilled because of that?
Well, there's competing interests. There's competing interests. And so having someone say that really disappoints me that you didn't do the reading isn't much incentive, whereas a major change in your grade is. So somehow there has to be, as you've said, the issues of on-ramps, being able to show up because you just enjoy education versus incentives that will make it so that you actually will do the readings.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Brian.
Hi. Yeah. So I have a lot to say. I don't know. So I'm next to Texas A&M, which some people know about, like called a cult by some people. Like I know a lot about people creating community near a university, and they're like a big thing is like having diverse people. So we have like nerds who are into the studying thing, and then we've got this, like they call it the core. It's the military like heart, like that goes back to the, since forever, and they're the keepers of the tradition, and we talk about tradition all the time, and we do this kind of thing. And then there are the goofballs that do stuff where new things are being found out, new traditions, and their bonfires is something that got me all hooked in. And so then like people wind up finding these different ways of creating this thing and like figuring out ways to care about it. And for some reason, football is a big part of that, but whatever, and so like it gets created, but you have to have all kinds of different ways of doing it, which I think is something the church can learn or has learned, but some people forget about it. And that's okay, because not everybody has to know what's going on in order to see what's going on. But if Peterson Academy is trying to be just one thing, yeah, it's not going to be that thing that Neil's talking about, because you have to have the place for the people who are going to find friends in the frat. And then you have to have another thing for the people to just get into academic groupie things. But it's nice if you can say that, okay, but on Saturday, like we pay attention to the football team or something stupid like that, but just something where we can all get together and make that our thing. Yeah.
Well, and I think that highlights the fact that time and diversity, all sorts of diversity, things grow. And part of the difficulty of some of these, let's say, business models is if the model is completely dependent on the business, often they won't have time to grow the kinds of things that you just described.
Or even worse, they'll say, this doesn't fit in the business plan, so you can't have our name on it.
That's right. That's right. Whereas, say, communities are more stable in that they just sort of are. And, people are families are working to live, and there's a diversity of incomes for a community. And so from a community, you're going to get this ecology of spirits, this ecology of growing, where you're going to have the nerds, and you're going to have the preps, and you're going to have and you're going to, you know, basically in church words, we talk about the gifts of the Spirit, where you're just going to have a huge diversity because people are like that. And if they all stay together, and if they're all, you know, you can use Pageauian terms here, if they're all gathered by something, then suddenly I mean, part of what makes universities so interesting is that they are so diverse. If you go to a university, you can find, you know, art house films, you can find band music, you can find lots of different kind of music. I mean, it's also partly by virtue of the young, and then the elements of the community that they maintain as, let's say, the professorial class. And so over time, you develop, and then you develop history, you develop memes, I mean, all that stuff that Alan was sort of joking about. I mean, there have been moments and episodes. Vervaeke talks with Jonathan in that video about ritual, about episodic memory. We've been together long enough in this corner now that there are episodes that stick in our minds. And again, we just recently had an episode, and these episodes then form and shape the community. And, you know, I haven't clipped yet any of Mark's conversation with Chad about AA's traditions, because there's a question about rules. And you see Jordan working on, okay, it's so interesting to me that he's working on the rules for the social media platform. And, you know, basically right now he's got kind of a 3 strikes you're out thing. But in a real community, Eric Weinstein talks about this all the time. In a real community, there's a space and a robustness that affords misfits, outliers, because the truth is, especially in a university, you've got all these people that are way at the end of the bell curve on all kinds of weird things, but the university affords them, it affords the community the capacity to make use of their extreme intelligence, even if they can't wear matching socks every day. So,
yeah. One thing that you were talking about the spirit, and like one part of that is having a memory. And so I wonder if, like, intellectual property, what you do with like grabbing videos and then we talk about your video, and then that gets ingrained into all of our brains, and then we can bring that up later, and that creates, it's not just a moment like TLC. It is an organism with a lifespan, and being able to call back to, you know, that thing before, like when you probably need to bring back up the set video or something, but that kind of thing, and like that creates a cohesion. And so like with A&M, with their whole thing about tradition and how do you discern tradition, it's just what people bring back up over and over again. Like that's the tradition that lasts and creates cohesion in the body, and creates, you know, like a longer term, more hopefully positive spirit or whatever. But I wonder if, because this thing is behind a paywall, if IP is, you can't win if you're going to be super protective of your IP. Like, you're not going to be able to create an organism like TLC. But if he's able to let it spill a little bit and let goofs like us come in and create a history for it, and let it get some cohesion and figure out what is important about what it's doing, that'd be cool. But that's hard to get people to break away from IP.
That's a super important point. And we've seen that, you know, with Daily Wire. I mean, Peterson was very liberal about letting people use his stuff. And I think that was genius, because even if your critics use it, in some ways, there's no bad press in some ways. And even if your critics use it against you, you're at least out there in the world turning it over. And, I wonder if part of the reason why Rogan came back to YouTube, and it seems, because once you start playing with these things, you begin to learn which channels are really locked down and which channels are fine. And Rogan seemed to loosen up. And I wonder if the people managing the Rogan stuff said, if we let it out there in the world more, and so, and this is a real bone I have to pick with Daily Wire. I mean, they put all the Exodus out there onto YouTube for a while, and then they took it back. Now, I'm sure plenty of smart people broke the YouTube terms of service and have copies on their hard drive, et cetera, et cetera. But this is what Peterson's complaining about with Disney. And I think you're exactly right that we're still figuring out these rules, because again, Peterson Academy, if they're just on YouTube, we don't know how to use these tools, and so we're playing with them. But your observations are dead on right. And
I stole them from Ray.
Go ahead.
Ray, I stole them from him. He pointed out that IP and it's all related.
Yep.
Felt like I need.
All right, Gavin.
Hello. How are you?
Good. How are you, Gavin? It's great you popped in the other day. It was great to see you again. And again, for people who sort of watch, and I don't have a lot of people down in the I'm not full up. So if anybody wants to come in and continue the conversation, that's fine. But I'm going to, Gavin, before I let you talk, Gavin's people cycle in and out because life is like that. You get busy with something, and I don't have time for you corner people for the next 6 months, but then it's like, oh, schedules have changed, or I have a little need in me, and so I'm going to jump onto live stream. So, and then just like Brian was saying, then you come back, it's much more community-like than, well, Gavin has re-enrolled in the PVK Academy. So what say you, Gavin? It's good to see you again. And I used part of I love that song that you made, and Chad uses it all the time. And I thought I want to use it for this live stream. So thank you for that. And I guess I'll be hearing from Neil's lawyer.
You're in gross. That's Neil's lawyer.
So what say you, Gavin? Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, a few thoughts. It's, I wonder what game's being played. What do it's an interesting question. What game are we playing here? What game are they playing at Peterson Academy? What do you do with whatever you get there? I use YouTube to fix my brake pads and my rotors and make mistakes and learn. It's like, it can be framed up with some kind of goal that you're actually trying to aim at. And so that's an interesting question. It's like, what's the goal? Is it, do you go work this thing and, you start networking and maybe you get to know people? It's like, I don't know exactly what the goal is that people are trying to play. We get to try and, I guess we can practice, aiming at a goal ourselves in the game that we want to play. And then I was trying to make a comment to Neil on Chad's video this morning, and he, there's this idea of the top down versus bottom up, and it does seem like, Paul, you're playing a game where you do kind of reach down and you help the homeless person. Like, that's something that I remember thinking at one point years ago. It's like, Paul gives the homeless person more attention than he gives me, and I would, yeah. And I felt bad about it, And I think Nate, at one point, I was talking to Nate about it, and Nate's like, this is the reason I love Paul. So that's what you're doing here. And this, it's a kind of spirit that we can each try to embody as individuals. And you can even look at, is Peterson going to be able to embody that spirit or try to embody it, and to what degree? And obviously there's this, we are paying with our attention and our time. The reason I went and started paying attention somewhere else, trying to, see what relationships could be grown elsewhere. But it gets expensive, So, and there's something to it. It's like, I was reminded of World of Warcraft and playing Halo and video games, where I just had the spirit of wanting to catch up with people so I could win, and I'd put in hours and hours getting better at Halo or getting better at World of Warcraft. And World of Warcraft is one of those games where you do get rewarded by putting in time. And so there's a sense of that going on as well, as like people put in time here in these communities, and you maybe, I don't know exactly what happens. Depends on what game you're trying to play.
Nope. But what you're hitting on, Gavin, I think is spot on, because it's transactional versus relational. So Peterson Academy, it's like, okay, I'm going to pay the money. I'm going to do the thing. And then I do this, and then I go through the game and I get some output where I'm a formidable human being. Haha. And maybe I get a job or something like that. Whereas here,
one class where you can find out how to eat healthy, like that might be valuable,
Yeah.
So I don't know. Some of those, I don't know what you do with them.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, so that's kind of the mystery of this non-place called TLC, because so part of the steep slope is the fact that there's zero barrier for entry, but then it's like there's no immediate rewarding payoff. And I cheated the system because I realized that the immediate rewarding payoff is like friends, like people I genuinely like. And that's how I video gamed this space. It's like, I'm going to make friends with this person, and that's been awesome. So like for the left brain video game guys like me in the space, I would say like you have to, and it's not if you, and that's part of the problem. That's part of the whole problem of everything we're in right now, is that the whole problem is push button, get this, push button, and in the meantime, life is happening while you're trying to get. Life is happening. That's where the juice is. That's the real stuff, the in between. And so where we're going with this is it's TLC is right brain, whereas Peterson Academy is left brain. And that really is the difference. We don't know, but it's kind of trusting the fellowship of the Spirit Midwestuary 2025. No, it's trusting the fellowship of the Spirit of this place.
My favorite question to Neil was, what's the most important thing that you get out of watching Mark Lefebvre? And he had said he liked the wording, or I forget exactly the name, the intimacy crisis.
Intimacy crisis,
right?
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that was good. And this is exactly what I'm noticing more and more, is just a lack of intimacy, and trying to actually be someone who can have intimacy, with God, with my wife, with whoever I'm interacting with, trying to get real, and trying to practice inviting people into it, because that's not easy too. I talked to a lady who has been doing a small group for 5 years, and she was praying about leaving the small group because there was no intimacy. And the next week it became intimate. So it's like, this is really, you had mentioned how the clip with Peterson wanting to have like watch parties. They're really just trying to have some small groups, and then really trying to have intimacy. We're trying to cultivate, these intimate relationships, which are, they're rare in my experience.
You threw out so much there, Gavin. The question of what is Peterson trying to do? And yeah, I think when I was going through the Peugeot Vervaeke Hall, that last sentence was intimacy. And Mark was really the one who pushed, it's an intimacy crisis. And, part of where I think this corner is interesting is that, like a town, again, this question of to what degree is how is community over the internet? To what degree is it functional? To what degree is it possible? What are the distortions?
Some people don't even have it in real life, though, and maybe most people don't even have
Right.
community in real life.
And part of that is because community is always a transjective thing, because some people have very little capacity for community. And I think part of what the corner is for is to help people who are online, because they have little capacity for community, hopefully grow in more community.
What's interesting is it's the community online here. I've been out searching for community in real life, and it's hard to find.
Yeah.
It's actually very hard to find community. Say everybody's like in a world with a screen, that's telling them what's happening. And if you don't pay attention to their story, they think you live in a cave, and they don't realize they live in a cave. So and we're all playing these weird games in our own caves, paying attention to our shared story. It's So this is the best community I've come across, but I haven't been on the search for long, but I'm gonna keep searching.
Well, and the intimacy thing is difficult too, because, and you recognize this if you're in a marriage, because there's ideally marriage is one of the most intimate communities of two that we can have. But what you begin to realize in a marriage is that intimacy isn't a foregone conclusion. And it takes two to create that intimacy. I mean, and the thing is, it just keeps drilling down. I mean, you can, even in, let's say, sexual union, you can feel lonely. I mean, we're so subtle with respect to these questions. And there was, I thought, in our breakout group at Northwestuary, there was a high degree of intimacy that was happening in that room. And oh boy. But yet it was weird, because we're there for a while, and the Northwestuary, the Sherry's conversation on Grail Country talked about that, because it's like, oh, we're all in this room together, we're all sharing this thing. Now we all go back and we're going to do community online again. It's like, oh, this is so difficult.
What do you think is the difference? I guess I'm asking this for all three of you, but what do you think is the difference between vulnerability and intimacy? Because I don't see a difference there, or the voluntary vulnerability is a necessary precondition for intimacy. That the willingness to, let's say, open my heart to someone else, to be changed by someone else. That's vulnerability that something like someone could said. What was that?
You sound like my wife. We've been talking about this for weeks and months. He just keeps talking about this word vulnerability.
I'm channeling my inner Luke Thompson deeply. No, but this
no,
is
you're
a serious
right.
question.
Right. It is, but it is a necessary precondition. I think intimacy is much more the satisfaction. Intimacy is when you arrive at it, or a sense of it. And you're not going to get it. You're not going to get there without vulnerability, voluntary vulnerability. That's true. But part of the difficulty is that voluntary vulnerability often leads to, I mean, there's a reason we pause with our vulnerability, because when we're vulnerable, we get hurt.
Yeah, that's the close.
And there's a weird, I think part of the reason that people are having at least a sense of intimacy, and definitely community online. Notice how many times on the Freddie and Paul show now, since Freddie's mother's died, Freddie doesn't open up with talking to his mother by talking to the camera. And that's, I mean, my monologues and commentary videos, I am letting you in voluntarily, and it's vulnerable, to what I'm thinking. And we've known this for bad and good for a long time with the internet, that people will type into chat rooms, text chat rooms, the most horrendous things. People are horrible on Twitter.
I'm going to toss one more thing in there. Jonathan Demir had a clip that it talks about this, and I don't even remember who was saying it, but basically it's like it requires a lot of vulnerability to actually listen to someone, like to allow them to control your mind with their words. Like this is the most intimate that it gets. Maybe it's what Vervaeke likes to use a fancy word for. It's the it's hard to listen. You have to become vulnerable to listen, and you can get hurt. There's people can do things with their words that cause your mind to do something that hurts very bad.
And I think that's, to tie this back to Peterson Academy, I think that's what we've developed here, that you cannot top down. You cannot top down convince people that the leap of faith to be vulnerable is a worthwhile leap of faith.
How do you invite people to do it? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
You don't.
I walk up to a stranger and like,
I'm not sure you can't do it top down, because churches do it that way often. Now, sometimes there's betrayal, but when you look at a worship service, especially in a Protestant church, with the right music, the right message, the right vibes, the right feel, what you're looking to do, I mean, what Megan was talking about in that live stream was vulnerability. She said she got home and she cried. And she said, and what did she relate it to? This was like summer camp. This was like band. This was like church camp, and when Sherry, after Northwest Jory, said, well, this is church. Well, what she's saying is that she had vulnerability and intimacy with a group of people that she had never met before. And I think part of what happens at these events is that we are practicing intimacy in these spaces. And then when we get in real life together, what I hear again and again at these events is there's no small talk. Small talk is all about this trust dance to see, I'm going to share this little thing with you and see what you do with it. Say, I drove 100 miles an hour to get here. And someone says, you asshole. It's like, there'll be no vulnerability here.
Does ritual prevent this intimacy sometimes, where we just go through the motions?
It can, but ritual also is because intimacy is all about trust. And right now in the Christian Reformed Church, we're having this big conversation because the Christian Reformed Church right now is a low trust environment. And so the question is how to have trust. And some people are saying you have trust when you have accountability. So we're going to maximize accountability and therefore have trust. And other people say that's opposite of what we need for trust. What we need for trust is experimentation and risking with each other. And they're both right, but figuring out exactly how that happens. And that's very right-brained, and it's very, gosh, and you start as an infant learning this. And once you, let's say, enter into a romantic relationship and a marriage, you're now in a master class. And then you have children, and now suddenly you're doing it with a group of people, and then in a church, and then in a business, and in a neighborhood. And, trust but verify, this whole strategic arms limitation stuff. So you guys are
I think it's you, Paul. PVK.
Yeah,
Vanderklang.
He's got to come out of the
Rick,
basement.
where's Rick? No, my other feeds are doing it too. So yeah, it's me. But so then when you make sure because StreamYard now is this new feature like this other Riverside. So when you close your window, keep it open for a minute to let it upload so that the final recording of this will have all of your local feeds. So, yep, I'm getting a little thing from StreamYard. Okay, I'm back. So, did you hear what I said though? It's the devil. The devil ruined my speech.
Powers and principalities. And
so
I just wanted to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Neil. Well, Neil, I jumped in
go
for Neil's issue of intimacy and versus vulnerability, and are they necessarily different? Intimacy in marriage is probably defined best by availability plus time, or maybe that's just a little formula. It is, and it's not chasing after quality moments or it's the mundane and quality. It's everything and all of it. And it builds. So you just don't talk. In fact, learning at the very beginning, all we did was talk. We talked. And then suddenly I noticed, oh, we're in the same room together and she's doing something completely different, but that's part of the formula. That's the intimate moment too. In a church setting, I think, and I'm only beginning to understand this, and partly through Paul, was it's the aggregation of 1,000 hours together. Sitting, sometimes praying, just sitting, talking about the weather, talking about my sick cousin, talking about my broke down car, the annoying coyotes that are killing my pets or whatever. I mean, it's just thousands of it. It's coming together. And if you break it, this is the problem with the church shopping, and I only discovered it in late age. The problem with church shopping is you break that cycle of intimacy and you have to start all over again. And you do that again and again. What you end up a kind of like a spiritual tramp.
I do want to talk about
1,000 different little relationships with 1,000 different guys, and you're kind of like, you're looking for the moment, looking for the magic. Sorry, Neil. Go ahead. Are you getting me? I think Paul's shaking his head.
I'm gonna run, but I want to talk about this more. But the Matthew Pajot stuck place, because when you either have an ability to change your arena, or you have the ability to stay in the arena and allow the arena to change you. And I think over the last 80 years or so, we've been doing a lot of the former and not enough of the latter. When you're stuck, I'm going to change the arena rather than allow the agent to be the one that's transformed. But here's the kicker that I figured this out. Well, I'm not the only one to figure this out. The agent is always being transformed, because we have this thing called time and we have this thing called death. The agent is always transformed. And so we're stuck with the agent transformation, whether we like it or not. And all that's up to us is the type and how the agent is transformed. So anyway.
Thank you, Neil.
Gotta run, but thank you all. Love you guys.
What do you think, Paul?
No, that's right. And it's not just 10,000 hours. I mean, that's, again, it's also the potluck, and it's the church needs a new roof. We need to raise a lot of money, and it's going to be hard. And so everyone's going to have to dig deep. That's when you look around and you know who you can trust, who's really here when the basket gets passed. And in fact, there's all of these little things. So that's very true. But also there's intimacy. Intimacy also has the dynamic of reciprocal opening, which is you gain a certain level of intimacy, but you realize that you want more, or maybe you don't. And so then you go deeper and deeper. And the difficulty in something like marriage is most of us don't know the bottom to that.
Right.
And then also, and it's also, the deeper you go, the more fragile it is. And so in something like Peterson Academy, okay, you have watch parties, but and you might have a good experience. And again, I think part of what's happening in, let's say, the relationship between TLC and Estuary is that they're feeding on each other. They're feeding from each other. Where we've done these. I mean, Graham in Sherry's video asked, how do you guys do this? And now he's a young guy. He's got a family. I mean, this is for people who have the time to do this by virtue of a whole bunch of different life circumstance. But, you know, and I'll often say people will sometimes, you know, a lot of people will contact me and say, I really want a Randall's conversation with you. I really want to talk to you. And it's like, okay, I have to figure out how to just meet all these people. And the difficulty is that with every conversation, it's the first steps towards intimacy. And if we only talk twice, there's something that feels dissatisfying about that. So then what I want them to do is I want them to go into the corner, because just like Neil's talked about, I want you to go into the corner and I want you to make some friends. The exciting thing for me about an event like we had was, oh yeah, people can shake my hand and thank you for your videos, yada, yada. The person I really want to see here is Alan. I have to see Alan. I wouldn't have spent $300 for the conference and $400 for the air flight and $500 for the hotel just to see you. I see you all the time on YouTube. You know, fine, thanks. Alan, I'll spend $1,000 and take some of my vacation time to see Alan. And when I heard that, that's when I knew something special was happening, because that's what my metric for church is. My metric for a church, if you go to the church because the pastor is a great speaker and you really like the music and all of those vibes, you do not have a church. You have an audience. The church says the pastor can come and go. We are the church. That's a church. And like you said, it's 1,000 hours of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yep.
And it's intimacy and trust.
Sorry, I did want to jump in. Like this exact point that you're making, Paul, like this is why there is no on-ramp. Like there can't be an on-ramp that makes it too easy, because it's like, then it's a consumption. Then it's like, oh, I'll show you this 30-minute video. And it's like, then they're not giving themselves to the corner. They're not submitting themselves to the spirit of the corner. So they can't actually experience it. It's like, I said this in the chat, but it's like, oh, I want to be a missionary. I just don't want to touch any poor people. So if I could be a missionary to the ultra wealthy, that would be awesome. It's just like, well, then you're not a missionary. Like, I don't know what to tell you. It's just like, I don't know. Like that is the fact that you are willing to engage with people. And if you're looking for people at the conference and you're like, oh, I only want to have this experience. Oh, no, sorry. Don't talk to me. We're in between sessions. Don't look at me in the eye. I'm just here to hear Rafe Kelly speak. Don't touch my hand, don't touch the hem of my garment. It's just like, then it's not happening. So when people, I think to Paul's point, I mean, it seems so clear now, but we struggle when it's like, but I really want my girlfriend to participate. And it's like, participate with the people in front of you, participate with the people who have eyes to see and ears to hear. And like, if you can go out and be a blessing to her in a way that might allow her to understand. But if you're just doing it instrumentally, be like, oh, okay, well, hopefully during this live stream, I realize the magic words I say that makes her understand, that makes my wife, girlfriend, friend, coworker understand. Like you're just using the TLC instrumentally and you're not actually participating in the spirit. So it's just like that, then you're not actually doing the thing. Sorry, continue, Mark.
No, Alan, I was just to bounce off of that. I think, though, that layers of participation, and I've met a lot of people offline and had private conversations that have been really amazing, that they just don't. This thing here with the Hollywood squares, as William calls it, is not their thing. And then the audio only format, I've gotten some positive response to that saying, I maybe can do that. Check back with me. And then, like I said, private conversations, Discord or just phone calls, and have had several of those. Some really amazing stuff. A couple repeats so we're growing a little bit together. And I think jumping onto the next level responsibility, where now you've got to be prepared to get reached out to. And that was the first, when I first had that experience, that was a little bit, oh, this is new. Somebody wants my phone number. Am I prepared to do this? In for a penny, in for a pound. And you start to jump in. So yeah, there's layers, but I think the most visible layer, you guys here, it's like, I feel like, okay, you're going to be asked to pony up a little more, and that's good.
Alex, what say you? Then we're gonna land the plane soon.
All right. So I was hearing all you guys talk about the so I guess I'll mention two topics to blend them in. Peterson Academy as far as vulnerability and how does that, is that doable and all that stuff, and it's kind of tied up into the same that. So I'll give you an example. So relationships, you can have a short-term relationship or a long-term relationship, and what works in a short-term relationship may not work in a long-term relationship. And it's one of those equilibrium, and not every situation is the same because every personality is different and whatnot. Sometimes it's being at the right place at the right time, but long-term, that requires multiple factors, and so I want to make it brief. So vulnerability, the downside to vulnerability, which is not healthy or not, let me rephrase that, imprudent in a short-term relationship, because that's when you are first wanting to even talk to you to get to know you. So you can't really be yourself saying, hey, by the way, these are all my flaws, just so you know, and I'm working on those. You can't just say that on your first date. It won't work. They'll just say, okay, bye. But in a long-term relationship, the more they know of you, the real you, then they help you on the same goals. Because, I mean, most of us want to be better, by and large. So and they also help us see the stuff that we still don't see. It might be obvious to everybody else, but silly me, I didn't see that, right? So to piggyback to bring this into the Jordan Peterson Academy, it is fairly new. So it's like a new relationship, but these are very smart people. They have to start somewhere. And I also do think that they're also going to take down notes, and they're going to see, and they're going to try to fix whatever problems that might come. Kind of like a relationship, things come up, and can we work through this? And the more, if you're in it for the long term and you really care about that person, you want to be with them, you will make it work. It works out. But if you're not in it, first argument, first problem, I'm out. And so, but now I've done education in different forms, and one of those was online school. Back because I did change my major, but so I did have one class where I did, and this is going to start to date me, University of Phoenix Online, back when it was a thing, and I chose to choose an accredited program because they offered a ton that were not accredited, but I changed my major and that was that. And even when I got into the nursing program, they were telling me, make sure that when you continue, you choose a program that is credited, because that will not transfer to a university. So you have to be aware what you want in the long term. Because I have peers that whatever they did is like, well, I can't continue. They're still working. They're just as good as me. Education comes in different forms and different shapes, accredited, non-accredited. And Jordan Peterson Academy, it is new, but they're doing something, and they're doing something different. And I call me silly, but I'm a little optimistic because they're offering something that's passing away in the traditional university. And Jordan Peterson mentions this in the social sciences. They have gone way, way out there in left field and is still evolving into further left, where 2 + 2 is 5 as a metaphor, and they will try to. This is coming from the professors. So the change that they're bringing, in my opinion, is a change that our society needs. And just like this phone, the smartphone, it started attached to the wall with rotary, that's where it started. And I never knew I needed a smartphone before they were invented because I didn't even know of it. And how many of us like, oh no, I forgot my phone. I gotta go back. Right? I can't leave the house. I gotta go back. This new type of education is just the beginning. It's new. They're smart people. They're doing not everything's perfect, but who is perfect? They're doing good, in my opinion, things that are going to profit society in a good way. And they're just getting started. And I'm sure they're going to iron out some wrinkles. But they are, just like I didn't know I needed my smartphone and I can't, it's attached to my hip. We don't know exactly how much people are going to yearn for these types of modes, these types of education packets, this type of information that some of us crave and need. And when we hear something that's off the wall coming from a professor, we're like, my gut tells me you're lying to me. Right? And it's from professors. So I think that they're getting started. I feel optimistic about it. And I think 10 years from now, it might be different than what it looks like right now, but in a good way.
Probably the case,
but in a good way. In a good way. And look at the change he's brought.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what he does with it, and yeah, and it's interesting because I'll get us out of these little tight windows. I'm interested because Peterson Academy is over here, and Ralston College is over there. Vivian in the comments was saying Peterson Academy is YouTube behind a paywall, and that's sort of true. And my fear is that will be true because part of what, when I was talking to John Papola, I was talking about is people are watching what's happened with streaming TV. And with streaming TV, YouTube is sort of beating out everyone else now. And part of the reason YouTube is beating out everyone else now is it's hard to compete against free and user-generated content, which is for YouTube free, is a hard thing to compete against too. Because sort of YouTube shares back to the creators, just not a lot. None of these big channels live on AdSense. But yet, if you just sort of throw this out, what you create is an opportunity to gain all sorts of things. It's Karen told this great story. If you go to Grail Country and you look at Karen's talk, maybe it wasn't even in the talk, might have been question and answer. She told this great story of it she read in the book. I've told this story a couple times, right? I'm going to keep telling it. A very famous art professor who taught pottery divided his class in two. And he'd say, this side of the class is graded on quality. Make the best pot you can. So you'd have everybody just tinkering, trying to imagine, trying to think, making pots in their head and he said, the other side of the class is graded on quantity. You're going to be graded on making as many pots as possible. Every year, the best pot came out of the quantity pot, the quantity group, because it's in the doing. And what happens, YouTube, with user-generated content is that you'll have maybe 99% of crap, but that 1% is now competing against all of these really smart people and trying to figure out how to do, the next great hit on Netflix. So anyway, got to land the plane anyway. So Gavin, you get the last word.
I love you, Paul. Thank you.
Gavin, it's great to see you, man. And God bless you and your wife and your. I loved the story you shared yesterday about your kids' soccer team. And I, again, it's so funny because there are a few kids, they'll win a trophy and they might go to competitive leagues, yada yada yada. But if they can make friends in that competitive soccer team, all the better. So, all right, Alex, I'm gonna close the stream. So thank you for coming on.
See ya.
All right, now I gotta find some branding. I already played Alex's song. Maybe a little of I don't know. This is some good poetry.
Still I have it. There are moments I conveniently forget that I'm a 40-year-old man. The last vestiges of a ghost long dead. The ghost with a Messiah complex. A Messiah too lazy to rise or ascend. Happily hurt and hard. A hanger-on or haunting of a time past. A heroic dream of the harrowing of hell. Failure to launch. Cling to a life vest. Treading in spells that linger and last. Mom and Dad, righteous and mad, daydreamers with ghosts of their own. My memory of them stoic, looking with aims to pretend. Always on the brink of somewhere. Each a child dancing on the fence. On down the river. Dreamt in the sunshine. Saturday morning cartoons, the only Sabbath I knew. A disciple of Jim Henson and John Hughes. Worship in cathedrals where the Toys R Us. Baptized in ball pits. A clown served the sacrament we eat. More Pepsi and Pizza Hut. Say please. Say cheese. Between Kurt Cobain, a scrambled cable screen, towers tumbling, Super Bowls, and reality TV, the ghost is constitutionally unwilling and intrinsically unable to see and be seen, searching madly for attention to seek. But you could be anything. Never say never. If you've got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing, ever. Don't talk to strangers. See what I say. Just do it. You don't listen very well, do you? You don't do very well, do you? You're not looking too good, are you? Keep up. Appearances aren't what they seem. Will you ever grow up? You look like you're stuck. I think you took too much. Echoes the ghost within the host, who prays the dead bury their dead and stay buried.